What makes an NBA defense great? And do the Chicago Bulls have that opportunity to be one of the best defenses in the NBA? I think it starts off, you need to have great point of attack defenders at that guard spot. And I think the Bulls have three of the best in the NBA. In terms of point of attack defenders, Jevon Carter, Alex Caruso, and Ayo Dosnumu, check that box. The Bulls have elite point of attack defenders. Then you're also going to need to have elite wings in the modern day NBA. You're going to need to guard those Jason Tatum builds, those Jaylen Brown archetypes, and they have that in a guy like Patrick Williams and then also a guy like Torrey Craig off the bench. Really good size with Patrick Williams and Craig. Good 6'8" frames with really long wingspans. The Bulls check that box as well. You're also going to need an All-NBA defender, and I think the Bulls have the best guard defender in the NBA in a man like Alex Caruso, who was first-team All-NBA defense last season. I think these are three things that you need to be a great defense in the modern-day NBA. Point-of-attack defenders, check. Elite wings, check. And having an All-NBA anchor type of defender in Alex Caruso, check. On today's show, I'm going to be explaining why I think the Bulls are going to be an elite defense next season. Let's toss it back to last season. You know, the Bulls did have their struggles. Obviously, they did not make the playoffs. They did make the play-in game, beating the Toronto Raptors, but then they actually lost to Miami Heat. And funny enough, they were actually up 4 with about 3 minutes left in that game. Who knows? Maybe the Bulls could have went on a run like the Heat did if they would have won that. But the defensive rankings for the Bulls last season, like the defense or the problems for the Bulls weren't on the defensive side of the floor. It was on the offensive side of the floor. I mean, they ended up being top 10 in points per game. They're top 5 in defensive rating, holding teams to really solid percentages, top 10 in field goal, and then top 15 in three-point percentages. But we really saw the Bulls defense take that next step when they added in a guy like Patrick Beverley halfway through the year. You know, Patrick Beverley, like he comes into the Chicago Bulls, and he's just the definition of those point-of-attack defenders. And we saw the whole Bulls defense and their whole culture really changed, where Pat Bev held his teammates accountable. He said, well, guys, we're going to be the team that picks teams up full court. We're going to be the team that's active hands, talking defensively, and Pat Bev brought that. And with the Bulls bringing in a guy like Jevon Carter, I think he could have that same effect. That's why I do think the Bulls have found an identity. And I think that is so huge for these teams. And no matter what the sport may be, whether it's the NFL and you're a pass-heavy offense and that's your identity, or maybe it's the MLB and you rely on your pitching instead of your hitting. I think no matter what the sport is, you need an identity. And I think the Bulls found that with the recent moves during the NBA offseason, by adding a guy like Jevon Carter, by adding a lanky wing who can pick you up full court in a guy like Torrey Craig. I think the Bulls, they have recognized that we can kind of lean into our strengths from last year and fully become one of the best defensive teams in the NBA, and they're kind of doubling down on that, and I'm all in because I think defense in the NBA nowadays has become underrated. But let's focus in on Torrey Craig to start with those two guys in terms of Torrey Craig and Jevon Carter. This dude's an absolute dog. He's a hustling machine. In terms of loose balls covered last season or recovered last year, he had 0.5, which was top 5 in the NBA, and he only played around 26 minutes a game. He's diving on the floor every single time he gets that opportunity. And those two, like, I will say this before I kind of get into Jevon Carter. This stat is extremely underrated to me because this is just adding your team an extra possession, and that might be the difference down the stretch in a lot of fourth quarters if you just do have that extra possession under your belt. But he's also a freak flying around on the floor, contesting over 5 shots a game, and he found himself 5th in the NBA. But then we can talk about the other addition, and this is one that I'm most excited about, is Jevon Carter. Is he an actual dog? Like, he is the true definition of a Chicago point guard. He's going to pick you up 94 feet. He went to press Virginia under Bob Huggins, where those teams, he kind of started that culture there, where they were the team that picked you up right after the inbound pass, and he was in your grill. He was sitting down in that chair, and he was that anchor on that West Virginia defense. And if you combine him with who we already have, Ayo Dosnumu, and a guy like Alex Caruso, who we'll get into here in a second, like, the Bulls have a great opportunity to really cement themselves as one of the better defensive teams in the league. And those two big pickups of Torrey Craig being that lanky, elite, versatile wing defender, and then Mr. 94 feet himself, Jevon Carter. But you got to have wings in the NBA if you want to be a good defensive team, and that's where Patrick Williams, my man, comes into play. The fourth overall pick in a couple of drafts ago. And maybe Patrick Williams hasn't lived up to that, top 5 selection in the NBA draft potential that a lot of us, think he can be. but I think he has the chance to be an actual elite defender, and he already was an elite defender last year. We could start off with his overall size. I think defense a lot in, whatever level you're playing at, high school, middle school, college, and even the NBA. I think a lot of it has to do with two things: size and heart. You got to have size if you want to be an elite defender. And Patrick Williams has that. 6'8" with a 7-foot wingspan, and it really helps his deflections per game number. Having those long arms, having that long wingspan. He's able to get his hands in passing lanes and deflect certain passes to get through and really be that disruptive force for other teams' offenses. Then just like Torrey Craig, he's flying around as well. He's contesting 5.5 shots per game. Due to his 6'8" size and that 7-foot wingspan, I expect him to be that. And then also the defensive field goal percentage, he's holding opponents to 47.1. And overall, I think Patrick Williams, he has an All-NBA first-team defense potential. It's just going to come down to in here with him. But overall, if he brings this, combine that with the size, he could be one of the best wing defenders in the NBA. But let's talk about the anchor, and let's just clap it up for probably the most underrated player in the NBA, in my opinion, and that's Alex Caruso. And Alex Caruso had probably one of the more underrated years from a guard last season in terms of just his defensive prowess. And he really is the anchor of this Bulls defense. I know a lot of people say, if you think of an anchor of a defense, you think of the big man in the middle. You think of, the center who's averaging 3 blocks a game. For the Bulls, it's Alex Caruso. I mean, these stats are ridiculous. In terms of steals per 100 possessions last year, he had 3.0, and that was first in the league. Steals per game overall, he was 9th, top 10. But deflections. Deflections are my favorite stat in terms of, judging defenders in the NBA. I really compare deflections to steals as pressures to sacks if we're comparing NBA to NFL, where I think the deflection and the pressure matters just as much, and if not more, than getting the actual sack or getting the actual steal. And Caruso's one of the best in the league. I mean, with his 6'6" frame, really long arms, he was able to get his hands on 5.2 deflections per game per 36 minutes. And then deflections per game, he was still top 5 with 3.4. And I could make the argument that Caruso is the best defender in the NBA. Obviously, I would like if you're talking about typical defenders that you would probably like him more, I would like a typical wing that's 6'8". But in terms of a guard defender, there's not many guards in the league that I would take over Caruso. Obviously, maybe a guy like Drew Holiday, you can make an argument who is great. But Caruso led the NBA with a defensive rating of 110.3 from January 1st to the end of the season. And most of that time frame was with a guy like Patrick Beverley. So if you give Caruso kind of running mates with a guy like Jevon Carter and Ayo Dosnumu, I think you're really going to see Caruso's impact kind of in full fruition this upcoming year. And the Bulls defensively last season, they were top 5 in defensive rating. And they were ended up being, I think it was top 3 since Patrick Beverley joined them, which is also another interesting part because, maybe Pat Bev may be a better all-round defender than a guy like Jevon Carter, but they have similar impact. So having Jevon Carter for a full year with Ayo and Caruso, again, point of attack defenders matter so much in the NBA, and Caruso is one of the best at that. He can sit down at half court, and he's got really physical attributes. He's got that strong chest, strong shoulders, where if a guard defender tries to give him a little bump, he kind of stonewalls him and uses his long arms to just be an absolute wreck on the defensive side of the floor. But I'll ask you guys, I think Caruso's the best guard defender in the NBA, but let me know your thoughts. This will be the pinned comment on today's video. So if YouTube throws an ad break your way, sit back and give me a Y for yes or give me an N for no if you think Caruso is the NBA's best guard defender. So in terms of what a best defensive lineup could look like for the Bulls, I kind of had fun with this. By no means do I think this is a lineup that they will run out ever. At least I hope not, or else the scoring output would be damn awful. But you could legitimately run a lineup like this, and you could just cause teams hell. And this is a lineup, I will say, a little undersized, but this is a team where I would want them picking up 94 feet and maybe run a full court 1-3-1 old school AAU days with these cats. But overall, having these 3 guys in the lineup at the same time, a little undersized at the 3 spot with Caruso. But again, Ayo and Caruso, really long arms. I think they kind of make up with their height, with their wingspan. Then obviously Patrick Williams, and I got some thoughts on Vooch here in a second. But obviously the front court defense for the Bulls is no denying. That is going to be a problem. Like Nikola Vucevic and Andre Drummond being your centers, you're not going to be that good of a defensive front court. But the best way to kind of combat that is to have strong point of attacking guards. Like I've been saying this entire video. Having those guys that can really disrupt a guard's flow on the offensive side of the floor. That's what Caruso, Ayo, and these Jevon Carters, That's what they do so well. They get these other offensive guards completely out of their flow, and they just kind of mess them up and get them out of the rhythm so where you don't need to rely on a guy like Nikola Vucevic. Because, hey, most of these guys in the NBA, they're rim protectors at that center spot. Best way to stop them from attacking Nikola Vucevic at the rim, don't let him get to the rim. And that's what a guy like Caruso does so well. So to conclude my thoughts on the Bulls being an elite defensive team this year, they have the personnel to do that. Like the strong point of attack defenders, like I said. You got your anchor in Caruso. You got your elite wings in Torrey Craig and Patrick Williams. You have the personnel to do it. So why not do it? It comes down to the big three. And that's kind of the main point of this. Like, yes, the Bulls have the role players to be one of the best defensive teams in the league. But it comes down to LaVine, DeRozan, and Vooch to set the tone. What I love about the Miami Heat and what they have established there down in South Beach is that Jimmy Butler and Bam, they do it on both sides of the floor. Because then the other role players on that team and the other young guys, they look at those two and they say, they're bringing it defensively every night. I should too. So I do think with guys like LaVine, DeRozan, and Vooch, they got to bring it defensively as well. And we saw it for Team USA. LaVine is a hell of a defender when he puts his mind to it. So overall, to conclude, Bulls got the personnel to do it. I just think it comes down to the big three. As always, you guys can give me a follow on Twitter at Pat Siepman. I'm going to be your go-to guy for Chicago Bulls content. So if you want more Bulls content on your Twitter feed, give me a follow. I'll make sure to put that link in the comment section and the description of today's show. Thank you guys so much for watching. That concludes my thoughts on why I think the Bulls are going to be an elite defensive team next season. See you guys next time. Go Bulls.